Chad Robichaux, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thanks for having me on, John. I'm inspired by you, so it's an honor to be on with you.
Man, it's very rare that I'm sort of speechless before we even begin a conversation, but I totally am. I'm in awe at where you've been, at what you've endured, at what you've done, at the mistakes you've made, at the grace you've received, at the life you're living today. So rather than me rolling out the red carpet and doing this obnoxious intro, if you were to bump into someone at a little pizza shop, you and I were talking about pizza before we hit record, and they say, "Hey, my name's John," and you say, "I'm Chad," and they say, "Chad, what do you do for a living?" How do you respond to that?
Man, it's always a tough one because I've been so blessed to do so many different things, but to me, it all falls on under one umbrella. And so I really tell people that I'm taking the experience of my past and package them under one umbrella to do a variety of things to help others. And that's what I do. I mean, I run Mighty Oaks Foundation, which we've served over 500,000 warriors and first responders. We have 170 employees there. And through Mighty Oaks programs, I run humanitarian rescue operations with special operations veterans around the world. I do public speaking. I've written 11 books now. I think like 5 bestsellers, and I have a podcast. And then I also can do a tremendous amount of consulting in all those areas to help because I'm a big believer in exponential impact. So if I take all the things that I figured out through this journey to myself, then I'll make a little bit of impact. But if I share those things with others and help others in those journeys, then the impact's exponential. So I lend myself out to do a lot of consulting for corporations, like from small to big, like companies like Exxon, all the way to a veteran wanting to start a nonprofit, just like I did. We have a saying at my foundation to say no to the good things so we can say yes to the best things. So putting some margin in my life because I'm such an entrepreneurial spirited person who's just heart and passion driven that if I see a need, I have to get my hands on it. And so I've really learned to put some good people around me to help manage myself and taper myself so I can be focused on the most impactful things. And I'm just learning that now at 50 years old.
Chad, I think people are already impressed by that laundry list, and that's just a whisper of the work you're doing today. They'll be even more blown away when they hear from where it was born. So I want to go back a little bit. You're talking to a guy right now from Missouri who grew up with a veteran father, small business owner. My dad was. He eventually raised 6 kids, had a couple dogs, great husband, great dad, prayer warrior, humble servant, like the kind of guy you write about, man. Like just this, my dad was awesome. Awesome. My dad taught me how to be a man in the best sense of that term. And yet you had a very different childhood than I had, which makes me even more impressed by the life you ultimately ended up leading. So talk to our listeners and viewers a little bit about what your life was like growing up in Louisiana.
Well, I grew up in very southern Louisiana. Almost like even now, if you go back to where I grew up, a place called Raceland, Louisiana, it almost feels like you entered into the third world country. So it's just, I mean, people still speak French there, and it's very just cultural. There's still people that don't own cars, they own boats, and they live off of cash, and they're fishing and hunting for a living. And so I grew up even 50 years back in a time in that place. So my family was very cultural. My parents spoke French, my grandparents spoke French. My mom's side of the family were all commercial fishermen. They fish catfish. My father's side of the family were baled hay in fields. And there's a lot of people working in the sugarcane industry there.
Right.
And so that's how I grew up hunting, fishing. I was probably outside hunting with me and my brother at 6 years old by ourselves, like hunting squirrels and rabbits. And we all hunt and brought food home and we went in the freezer and that's what we ate. So most everything I grew up was either caught or killed.
Wow.
And that's kind of how I grew up. So I love the fact that I grew up that way. I really like I think it's a very unique place to grow up in the United States. But I was also grew up in a very broken home. My father was a first Marine in our family, served as an infantryman in Vietnam. Myself and both my sons, Marines. So big military history, military family. But my father came back from Vietnam very broken. He was a very angry man, a very violent man, a lot of physical abuse in our home. And so I grew up in that very dysfunctional lifestyle. My brother and I were super close. Anybody that's grown up in a dysfunctional home like that, where you had physical abuse, like fist to face physical abuse, the siblings get really close.
Right.
So my brother and I would just always like, we'd be out in the woods or the swamps or whatever playing, and we always would pretend we were in the military. And as we got older, we thought, man, that was something we wanted to do because it was a way to, in our mind, it was a way to escape living there. And I remember being 13 years old, he was 14 years year older than me. We saw this video called "Be Someone Special." It was a Navy SEAL video, and they had a poster associated with it. And we had the poster, and this poster, this Navy SEAL, he's got this green
Totally, man.
face is painted green, boonie hat on, seaweed off of him, twin 80 scuba tanks. He's coming out of the water with his mask still on his regulator in his mouth. He's got his rifle. I remember just seeing that and saying, like, I want to do that. Like, it wasn't like I want to be in the military. It's like, I want to do that. But I didn't want to be in the Navy. And so it was something about my dad. This dysfunctional as my dad was, he was always so proud that he was a United States Marine. And that led me to want to follow in those footsteps, that like make a bad guy happy. And so I learned about special operations in the Marine Corps. And my brother and I made the decision that's what we were going to do. In about a year, we started running, swimming at the young age of 13 and 14 years old. We were already into martial arts. We were already working out and stuff.
Right.
But a year into that tragedy, my family, my brother he was shot and killed, and so it was very devastating. My family broke apart. I can tell you that through the devastation of that family, I ended up living on my own. Me and my older sister, who was in college, and when it came time to actually get the chance to join the Marine Corps, although I had continued to prepare for that and keep that commitment my brother and I made, I wasn't going to graduate high school. I was failing high school. I was trying to work, and I was working on a roofing crew in Louisiana, which is tells you quick you don't want to do that for the rest of your life in the heat of Louisiana. But I went to a Marine Corps recruiter named Staff Sergeant Ronald Brown. And I'll always remember his name because he helped me get in the Marine Corps in 1993 at 17 years old without even a high school diploma. And it gave me a chance. And look, I mean, I could fast forward to today, went in the Marine Corps, failing high school, no high school diploma. I got a master's in business MBA from New York Tech, and I have a one semester away from a second master's from Harvard University, and chair of the boards of several businesses. And I've been blessed, I've been very successful. And I attribute all that to that fork in the road where someone believed in me, just like I heard in your story when someone walked into the hospital and tried to help and encourage you to move forward during your fork in the road. I had this one recruiter that didn't know me or anything. He probably needed to fill a quota, but for whatever the case, he impacted my life. And I don't know him. I don't know where he's at today. His name's Ronald Brown, but man, he changed my life. Like he gave me a chance. And when you get a chance like that, you could either squander it or you can embrace it. And at that young age of 17 years old, I embraced that opportunity, and I went on the path, a hard path, a long path to become a reconnaissance Marine, go into special operations, and a long journey. I was in almost 10 years before I got the chance to deploy. I ended up as a Force Recon Marine, not getting a chance to go to combat. And then I later tried out for a JSOC task force with Joint Special Operations Command. I was brought on as a contractor to what I believe to be the premier special operations unit in the world. I won't say the name of it, but it was where our premier units are at special operations. And I got to serve there and did 8 deployments to Afghanistan, back to back to back. And my job there was an advanced force operator, doing clandestine logistics and working undercover in Afghanistan and other countries around there, and to help that unit catch and kill bad guys. And it was an incredible opportunity and experience.
Man, you just went through 4 life stories in 3.5 minutes. So I'm going to kind of
Or
chapter
you can
this
dig
out.
in. Yeah, I don't know what you want to dig in at, but there's a lot.
I don't have a clue either. I mean, I wish we could like have a call-in show right now to say, hey, people, what do you want to hear more about? But I think I want to hear more about, you talked about my dad. I grew up fist to face. So listen, my dad raised his voice a couple times. I got 2 spankings growing up and deserved a lot more. That's my version of a disciplinarian father. You grew up with a profoundly abusive father, a father who never once showed you any whisper of love and never once showed your mother any whisper of love, never once showed your brother any whisper of love. Then you talked about at least I had my brother. Man, that guy, he was my buddy. We hunted, we fished, we dreamed, we fought together. Like that was my buddy. And then he's murdered. He dies. And you went on from there. So I'm curious. Here you are, this young teenage boy who's only known abuse and brokenness. And then you lose the one friend you got. Whew. What kept you going, man? Like what, how does this little kid keep moving forward in his life?
Well, I tell you, like one of the things right now in being in ministry, you work around people with a lot of loss, and from different, not just veterans and first responders, because you just get exposed to everyone who has hurt, especially when you public speaking. People come to you with their hurts and things. I have a deep empathy for people that lose family members,
Right.
probably anything else, because of all the loss I've had, and I've lost friends from combat. I've had tremendous loss in my life, but sometimes 30 years later, I'll be driving in my car and thinking about my brother, and I'll come to tears.
Yeah.
How does that like that long of a time? This happened when I was 14 years old. I'm 50 now, 35 years ago. Like, how does that long a time you have such a deep wound? There's just a bond, and I think when God knits families together, there's just such a bond amongst siblings and family. I can't imagine a parent. I'm a father of four. I have six grandchildren. I can't imagine the loss of a child and watching my family endure the loss of my brother. And so I just have, because of that, I just have such an empathy for that pain. And I don't know how I got past it. I went in a deep isolation. My father couldn't handle a grieving wife, so he went work overseas. My mother, it was my stepmother. She couldn't handle the loss of a son. She went back to where she grew up and lived with her parents. And that's why I left me and my sister. Me and my sister just endured it. I never got counseling. I never had therapy. I never had anybody ask how I was doing. I hung around. I'm kind of a rough guy. And so the people I would gravitate to as friends in high school were rough. They were always out in trouble and drugs and stuff like that. But I never tried a drug in my life. Never smoked a cigarette, never smoked weed, never did anything in my life. My use of alcohol would probably be like 3 drinks a month for recreational social events, like literally 3 drinks a month, not drinking 3 days a month. But the reason I think I endured that through high school and through the peer group I was in was because this bond I had with my brother and this goal that we set. And I say that to say, how did I get through it? Well, I had a goal that was set with my brother, and I was committed to achieving it.
Mm.
And so, man, when I was in high school, I was running like 50 miles a week. I was going to the YMCA and swimming. I was preparing myself to meet this goal. Even though I knew, like, I'm not making it through high school, I'm not graduating high school, I just knew I was going to get the chance somehow. And when I finally get to there, I go to Marine Corps, I go to infantry school, I go to, like, every door was closing to get to try out for to be a recon Marine. And then I get to BRC and I'm like passing everything. And I have this event that I get caught talking to someone else at this event. I get caught essentially cheating, and I get a no go for something I was really good at, and it was like hard to change. But I just go back to a unit and have to fail something and do it again. But I just knew I had to finish it, and I went back. So I had to go to Long Road. I had to do part of that all over again,
Yeah.
just to meet that goal. And when I finally became a recon Marine, I felt like it was to myself too. I just felt like I had achieved something that I had set at a very young age to do, my brother and I, and it was redemptive.
Mm.
That and it's always been
I'm curious, what did the United States Marine Corps give you that your family did not?
family. I have friends in the Marine Corps, Mark Terrell, Wayne Knoll, that I met, back in the early '90s. That I cannot talk to them for 3 or 4 years, and pick up the phone and call them, and it's like there's no gap, like yesterday. Just like a deep bond of family that. I mean, I know either of those guys, Philip Thone, like these guys, I could call them at 3 in the morning. Like that level of brotherhood and friends that I have, like that loyalty that I
Right.
didn't have that in my own family. Marine Corps offers that. There's a lot of great things about the Marine Corps. There's a lot of really bad things. There's a lot of great people and horrible people. It's very competitive. It's especially in the special operations community. It can be very rewarding and
Yeah.
very unifying, but it can also be very much a struggle and cutthroat. You're surrounded by people that are high achievers, but also have an extreme level of discontent. I've really learned this as I got older.
Interesting.
The type of people that are able to do that kind of work are never content. They
Mm.
do something and then it's like, okay, that was good. They achieved probably something that 0.00 add 20 zeros, 1% of the world will ever do. Like the one in literally one in like 100 million person, and they're
Right.
still not good enough when they achieve it. What's next? There's something's missing inside of them, and you're surrounded by people like that. Nothing's good enough for them. Nothing's good enough for you. It's such a competitive environment. It is the one thing that makes them function at the highest level, but it's also
Right.
such a detrimental thing to the character and community.
Mm.
It's a very eclectic place of people to navigate, and I think brotherhood is what I gathered most out of that. I have friends that I'll have for till the day I die through
Right
those
on.
experiences.
So I've had the honor of speaking 3 different times at JSOC and twice to the leaders, the servants, the warriors, the operators. But my favorite time was actually speaking to the spouses. I'm not going to tell our listeners the name of the officer who brought me in to speak, but to walk into this room and see the warriors who keep the families moving forward when the operators are overseas, man, that's about as moving an experience as I've ever been a part of. So talk about the family of JSOC. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, it takes a very special type of woman to be married into that environment. I mean, special operations is one thing, right? But when you're in traditional special operations, you're going to be in like a rotational cycle. Typically, I'm just giving an example. Imagine like 6 months of like kind of downtime, but that downtime ends up being training, a lot of training because you're not traveling, and then 6 months preparing for deployment. So
Yes.
you're working 24/7 preparing for deployment, and then 6 months being away, and then the cycle starts over again. But it also is predictable, so you can plan things. When you're in a JSOC unit, you're on call 24/7. Could be going at any moment's notice. So the spouse has to have a lifestyle that's prepared for the immediate absence of their husband. And by the way, they may not know where he's going, how long he's going to be going, and
Yes.
communications. I mean, when I was overseas, there'll be times that I'd be like a month without any communication with my spouse. No idea where I'm at, what I'm doing, if I'm alive, if I'm dead, and vice versa. I mean, somebody probably find me and contact me if something happened to my family. But for a spouse to not know and know that not only not know, but have the maturity to know they can't ask,
Mm,
it takes a very special type of person. And then endure that over and over and over and over again. I did it
break.
for 4 years for me, 4 years at JSOC in those
Yes.
8 deployments. There's spouses that do that for 20 years. And these are just some amazing unsung heroes of our nation
Great.
that are able to hold down the home front that allows these guys to go out and do what needs to be done so that we can stay here safe and not have a podcast like this, sleep and go to bed tonight, not worry. And protect people around the world, by the way, who can't protect themselves. Because regardless of what you believe about foreign operations or not, there are people around the world. We are the big dog on the playground. Like we have a responsibility to protect the weak and most vulnerable of our world, and we do. And who's out there doing it most of the time? It's our JSOC units.
Mm.
When people need help, we go help.
Man, you spent a career in the military. You spent a career in Marines, SEAL, JSOC, deployment after deployment after deployment, and then you come home. How did those deployments change you? I know it's like, John, you're asking a loaded question there, but you
No,
went away a broken warrior.
well,
And
it profoundly changed me. I mean, I was a very happy-go-lucky, like obviously with my training experience and my mindset, I have the capacity to be a very violent person, like to a bad guy. But I'm also my nature is very compassionate and empathetic, and that's just who I am. I'm a very like emotionally like driven person.
yeah,
And so my family had only seen that. And then I go and living at that level of stress, anxiety. I'm coming home and I'm behaving like my father did. I never put my hands on my family, but yelling at them, slamming doors, breaking things. Just the more stuff happened, the more loss, the more frustration, the more intense. Like I was just in this place, and then my empathy went away. I had no empathy. I couldn't feel anything. My wife would be crying. Like, made my wife cry, and I don't even feel bad. What's wrong with me? If I go back to a scenario, I remember, in 2004, Foster Harrington served at Foster Harrington for 10 years. He served at my wedding. He was there when my kids were born. We were supposed to be in this deployment together, and he took my spot. And he went from my number two to taking my spot. He was out without me and gets killed. First, very close friend that gets killed. You feel that emotion and anger and frustration, everything you'd feel if you lose a friend, especially if they're killed in combat. But that night, I had to go out and operate. So you don't get to stay home and grieve and do a funeral. I mean, Kathy went to the funeral, my wife went to the funeral, but I was out overseas. So, so when you do that over and over and over again, I think God has a way of for our limbic system to turn that off so we can function, so we can survive. If I was going out operating at night, grieving my friend, I'm going to get killed or I'm going to get someone else killed. And now you do it over and over and over again. I think something turns off inside of you,
yes,
empathy, so you can focus on doing your job and survival. And I think that's actually not that's a gift that we have for survival that God gives us through the very intricate design of our limbic system and how our body functions. But then at some point, if you don't turn it off, now you don't have the empathy toward when
I
it's
was thinking,
necessary,
yes,
when it's required. And so I was very harsh and very cold, and that caused a lot of problems in my family and completely changed who I was. Brought some distance in my family when I came home, and and we had a compromise in our operation. If you read my book, Saving Aziz, which went
Yes.
through full Pentagon review. It's extremely redacted, so I can't say where because it's redacted. But I was in a neighboring country working at kind of an undercover type operations, and I was abducted by a foreign intelligence agency through a
Which, by the
compromise.
way, it's the wildest story I think I've ever heard. We don't have time to unpack it today. You should read the book, but
It was a crazy scenario. And a compromise led to a number of our teammates being killed, and include some
yes,
local nationals. And so after that, we even continued to operate even after that. But that led to me having a severe breakdown, anxiety, depression, extreme panic attacks, like where I believed I was physically dying. And I was read out of my program, and I was because I was a contractor on my program at the time. I was cut from my program because not because I couldn't function in that capacity anymore. The psychologist diagnosed me. When you're diagnosed with something like that, you can't do that job anymore.
right.
And so, I dealt with this downward spiral for 3 years of this debilitating panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and that led me to a point to where my family was falling apart. And I always joke when I'm speaking. You probably have your little grandpa jokes. You say the same things over and over when you're speaking. But I always say I did martial arts since I was little, but I'm still little. I'm 5'4". I did martial arts my whole life, and I was a professional MMA fighter on the side. Jiu-jitsu is my sport. I was fighting professional in the military. Let me do it on the side, so I was undefeated at that. So in that anxiety, in the depression, I didn't like the medicine. I like therapy. I got on those mats, and I just started digging in, and it's something like that could be good for you, but you could abuse it as well. And like a medicine, right? You can have medicine that's good for you, and you can abuse it, and that's what I did with martial arts. And so I started fighting professionally again. That was my recovery of coming home. I ended up ranked number 6 in the world. I won a world title. I went 18-2 as a professional fighter. I won gold at black belt in jiu-jitsu and through the IBJJF and several advanced American nationals. And so on the surface, it looked like it was a huge success, but underneath that, I never got well. And so me and my wife were totally living separate lives and ended up in multiple affairs. We filed for divorce, and I spent 3 months alone in an apartment, training for this fight on Showtime, big fight on Showtime. And when that fight was over, I just came to this thought, like I just felt like there was nothing in front of me. There
Yes.
was nothing else in front of me, and I was just like, I looked at everybody around me and all the damage that did to people I cared about, and I thought, man, maybe my family would be sad without me, but they'd be better off. And I made this decision. It's the same hopeless thought and decision that finds a home in the hearts of over 20 something veterans every day. The real number is probably like 50 something veterans every day. All kind of people around, even outside the veteran community, just people, made my family, made my loved ones be sad without me, but they'd be better off. And I made a decision to take my life. So I sit in my closet in my apartment, and I had put my family pictures on the floor around me, and I had a Glock 22 pistol, and try to build up the courage to pull that trigger. And every time I put that gun to my head, I had this thought of who's going to find me. My oldest son, Hunter, at the time was the only one that had a key to my apartment, and the thought of him finding me that way. There's a statistic: 1 in 3 children from a parent that commits suicide will do it as well. And with 3 children at a time, I was thinking like, man, what, you know, to leave that legacy behind of quitting and doing something so horrible. But I was still in such a dark place that even though I put down the gun in that moment, I was back there
Yes.
shortly after it. And it was Kathy that came to my apartment. And one morning I had that pistol in my hand, and she knocked on the door. I wasn't going to answer it. When I heard her voice announce herself, I kind of panicked, and I hid the gun under a blanket, which illustrates my shame because she would have never came in there. Right. But it illustrates my shame. And I ran to the door. So mad that sounds crazy. I was so mad that she interrupted me killing myself that I just wanted her to leave. And I was yelling at her to leave, and she wouldn't leave. And in the middle of this argument, she asked me a question that, saved my life, changed my life, or probably saved my life. She's like, how could you do everything you've done? We met when we were 17 and 18. She saw me become a recon Marine, all the training, all the stuff, the
Everything.
fights, the deployments, the cutting weight. She's all this discipline. She's like, how could you do all of that? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. And she had challenged me. And I had tried everything at that point. And she was right. I'd been successful at professional things in my life, but it came to the most important things. I quit. And so I made a decision to get back in the fight. I knew I couldn't do it alone, but I knew I couldn't do it with the people I was surrounded by. I needed someone outside of my circle. And she had been going to this church, and I just asked her. I didn't care about church. I didn't care about God or anything. I just cared about like someone outside of my circle, and that was the only other network I knew. So I was asked, "Is there some man at this church you're going to that can help hold me accountable to this decision?" And I met a man named Steve Toth. And Steve Toth actually, at the time, he was a small business owner of a pool company. Wasn't an MMA fighter. Wasn't a military guy. In fact, he just beat Dan Crenshaw for the congressional seat here in the district where I'm sitting. So he's a new congressman for us. But at the time, he was just an elder on call at the church, and he met me at a Starbucks coffee shop. And the plan of how to fix my life, it was really good. I was so proud of it. And I wanted to show it to him so he could show it to her and tell her I was serious and I'd win her back. But when I showed it to him, he didn't even look at it. I just remember he put his hand on that paper and slid it back over to me and told me that this plan was going to fail and I was getting it back on my face. I remember being real offended, but I specifically remember very vividly him tapping on the paper and not looking at it. He was just looking at me and he said, if this plan doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to let you waste mine. And I tried everything. I've been on medication, counseling, all the therapy, all of this stuff. And some of those things are good. I had professional success, financial success, respected again,
Yes.
bravado built back up from them. But of all those things, some of those things are good, some of those things are bad. None of those things that changed my situation. We have a saying at Mighty Oaks now because of that moment. If what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? And so I tried
Amen.
this guy and I gave him a chance and I surrendered my life to Jesus. I didn't even know what that meant, to be honest with you, at the time. But beyond that decision, like it was more like, what do I have to lose? Like I tried everything else. I'm not only ready to die, I want to die. What do I have to lose? Like give this last ditch effort. Beyond that decision, Steve had discipled me for a whole year in biblical living. And if I could go back 20 years before that, when my brother died, I had this family that took me to this church. It was like an hour away. And I remember going to this church, and they brought me there because my brother had just died. And this pastor's giving this message. I'm 14 years old. And I felt like, man, he's talking to me. And he gave this like, call to salvation at the end. I go up to the front and I make this decision to give my life to Jesus at 14 years old. I didn't even know, again, just like when I'm 35, didn't even know what it meant. But beyond the decision, that was it. I left that church that day. This family was an hour away from me. There was no follow up. There was no discipleship. There was no, and so while I still had this decision, it was no one to teach me to live it out. Fast forward 20 years later, same thing happens. Steve has this 20-year apart call to action. I make this decision. The difference now is for 1 year, I have a mentor in my life who
Mm.
discipled me and taught me how to live out that decision. And man, to other people, it may sound pretty simple, but to me, this was extremely profound. What I discovered through that decision was of all the things that happened to me, I just shared a very small glimpse of some of the things that happened in my life. Of all the things that happened in my life, lost my brother, Afghanistan, loss of friends, as bad as some of those things may have been, as bad as I could say these things were done to me, the reason I ended up in that closet with my pistol in my hand was not because those things were done to me or happened to me. The reason I ended up there was because of the choices that I made in response to those things. And I never lost the ability to make good choices. I was just making bad ones. And the reason I was making bad ones because I didn't really have a model for making good ones. And so
Mm.
what the Bible offered me, what the discipleship offered me was a blueprint of how to make better choices, to pause, stop, and not make erratic choices and say, hey, what's this book of wisdom, this handbook for living? People say life doesn't come in a handbook. It does. We just don't read it, right? And I found it had an answer for everything. And so I
Mm.
slowed down my emotional responses to stuff. I paused, sought out wisdom through God's word or through mentorship, and started making better decisions. And it was pretty much as simple as that. And what I found through that was that by making these better choices in response to the things that happened to me, but I can't change what happened to me, I can change how I respond to it. I found restoration, I found hope, and ultimately I found new purpose. And ultimately, what I was really struggling with and needing from coming home from Afghanistan was purpose. And Mark Twain has one of my favorite quotes. It says, "The two most important days in a person's life are the day that they're born and the day they find out why." And I feel like when Steve Toth introduced me to a relationship with my Creator, to live the life I was created to live, I found out the why, and that why has been manifested through the same thing you're doing, going out and sharing that story, that lesson, the lessons I keep learning today because I don't have it figured out yet. I'm still figuring it out every day. That was 16 years ago, and I probably will never have it figured out. But the lessons I'm learning, just paying it forward to others, and it
Mm.
really for me, like all this stuff I do, it's as simple. That's the question you opened with, right? What do I do when people ask me my elevator pitch speech? It's simple. Like what do I do? I fell on my face. Someone helped me get up. I turned around and helped the next guy. The next guy helped the next guy, and so on and so forth. That's been going on for 16 years now. And that decision that I made, Steve helping me, has impacted probably millions of people. And I just get to be a part of it. I'm one part in that piece of the millions of people that have been impacted because one person turned around and helped another up and encouraged me to do the same and equipped me to do the same.
Man, that is such good news. I mean, in a world that is filled with only negative headlines, one guy had a coffee with you. and then push your kind of BS blueprint back at you. And by the way, if you've never met an operator, they're intimidating. Even if they're smiling, there's a certain intimidation that you guys carry that you just can't let go of. So for Steve to look you back in the eyes and say to you, "This is not going to work for you. But if you
Yeah.
want to get serious, I'll work with you." That man is a profoundly incredible leader.
Well, I'll tell you that there's a lot of truth in that because the reason I was in the situation I was in, look, I take full responsibility of everything I've done, but I had surrounded myself with everyone that told me everything I wanted to hear and not what I needed to hear. It wasn't just the military stuff because I didn't even really talk about that at the time, but being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt,
Right. All that
winning a
stuff.
world title, being like undefeated in MMA, like I'm in this gym, I have 1,000 students, and when I walk in those doors, it may have seemed as someone outside like the most elevating environment, like everybody lifts you up. You walk in, everybody stops, shakes your hand, and tells you how great you are. That was the most dangerous place in the world for me to be because I had zero accountability.
Yeah.
And I look back at that and I don't blame anybody around me for that. I systematically built that because anyone that tried to tell me the decisions I was making were wrong, like being unfaithful to my family, I don't want to just say my spouse, my family, like being a jerk, pushing people, like anyone that told me that, I pushed them out of my life because I wanted people that affirm me.
Yes,
And
man.
there's no
Yes.
more dangerous place, not in the MMA ring, not in Afghanistan, not in Peshawar, Pakistan, like the most dangerous place on earth at that time. Like there's no more dangerous place for anyone to be, particularly a man to be, than without accountability in your life. And that changed as soon as I seen a guy that owned a small pool company who was elder and called it in church, had the courage to tell me, no, this isn't right. This isn't going to work. You're not going to manipulate me because that's what I was trying to do. Essentially, I was trying to manipulate him to get my way, to win my family back, and it didn't work. And so, a lot of people don't. I don't talk about this a lot, but the reason Steve had the courage to do that is because the person he tried to disciple and mentor previously for 2 years before, he was passive with, and that guy took his life. And he thought if I would have been bold with this guy, if I would have challenged this guy the way he needs to be challenged, he might be alive today. So I'm the next person in line. And so he was inspired by that loss that he had. His losses, that was a painful thing for him. You've been through some painful things. I've been through some painful things. But man, when you look at life and when God gives us the opportunity to pour into those around us, it's usually not because of our good experiences. It certainly is never because of a lack of experience. It's
Right.
always because of an experience we had that God allowed us to go through. I don't think God didn't burn you, right? But could he have stopped it? All right, that's a big question, right? He hung the heavens and earths. He created all of eternity, the infinites of eternity. Like he created all that. Could he have stopped you from being burned? Could he have stopped me from seeing the situation? Of course he could have. Why didn't he? Right? Because he knows the end game. He trusts us with our experience. In James 1:2, it says, consider it pure joy,
Pure
right?
joy.
It's joy when we face trials of many kinds, because we know that testing of our faith, like we test through our faith through our perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work, that we may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I believe that mature and complete is us connecting to the point to being who God created us to be, to do what God created us to do. And we can't be who we were created to be and do what we were created to do unless one, we have a relationship with the creator, and two, we have lessons to offer. Like
Yeah.
what would we have to offer if it wasn't for our hardships that we endured? So the things that we think could be the worst thing in the world that could happen to us could be the best thing that happened to us. And I think, without getting preachy here, I think Jesus is the best example of that, because you think, we just got done with Easter and Good Friday. People are like, the worst thing that could ever possibly happen in eternity is taking the Son of God, the Messiah, in falsely accusing him, betrayed by his friends, spit on, mocked, nailed to a cross, and murdered by his own creation. You have to think that's to be the most horrible thing, the horrible moment all of history. But there's another perspective. It's the most
Oof.
beautiful and amazing moment in all of history, because that horrific event is what allows you and I to be saved and have a eternal relationship with our Creator because of that sacrifice. It allows us to have a free pass for all the mistakes that we made. And so when you look at you being burned, me being hardship, like those things are bad, but they're also what allow us to do what we do.
Yeah.
And that perspective, to me, you ask, how I endure those hardships. That perspective for me changes everything. It brings value to our hardships. It brings
Yeah.
purpose to our hardships, and it brings fruit by sharing those lessons with others.
Chad, just two more questions before we begin moving toward the finish line. The
Yeah.
first is after you raise the white flag, probably for the first time in your entire life, man,
Yeah.
you raise this white flag, you surrender to something bigger than yourself, you lean into your faith, you lean into this guy named Steve, you walk the path with him, you elevate the way you feel about your faith and ultimately the way you feel about how God wants to use your life in a mighty way going forward. How did that change in your mid 30s change not only the way you felt about yourself, but maybe more importantly, how you were as a husband and as a dad?
Man, it completely changed how I was as a husband and dad because I had to take extreme responsibility for the damage I caused. And I'll go back a second. Was really good friends with the Robertson family, Duck Dynasty, Phil Robertson. And I was with him when the movie The Blind came out. And
Yes.
Phil had a really hard time with his past. He had a lot of pain from knowing he was that way. He's a person of very extreme conviction. This is right before he passed, and he wanted me to come on his show and share. I had shared. He had heard my story many times, and I went on his show on a Shane podcast and I shared my story. And he's never quiet. He sat there quiet the whole time. He wasn't quiet because he was letting me talk. He was quiet because he was contemplating what he was going to say.
Yes.
And after we're done, we were hanging out in the place where kind of the podcast in the back where you go hunting. I go hunting with them a lot. He comes out and he says, Chad, like, he's very direct. He's like, you can leave sin, but the consequences of sin will never leave you.
Mm.
And I think he was kind of talking to himself at that time because of the pain he was facing, the consequences of his past sin. But he was also talking to me. And I really reflected on that for some time. And it came back, resurfaced after he passed it. And I thought, about that, like all the things that we do and the mistakes that we make, we could have a repentance for those. I certainly believe we could have restoration. We have a good God that is full of grace and gives us restoration, gives us a new purpose. But the damage we cause doesn't go away when we confess our sins. And that's very important for a believer to make because I think sometimes we think we get a clean slate. And I certainly did at first. So it's a very long road to learn that I didn't get a clean slate completely because I caused damage and that damage had to be restored with other people. Just because it felt redeemed for me doesn't mean it felt redeemed to others. And so there's been a tremendous amount of work through that. And ultimately, because of my consequences, my wife tried for a very long time, but I lost my wife through this. There's been a restoration story and stuff like that, but ultimately, and rightfully, she was never able to get past that.
Right.
It's the consequences of sin. And I think there's a lot of lesson in that you could have like a decision like I made, turn things around, build a beautiful ministry through restoration, help so many other people, but the damage is still there. And there's grace and there's forgiveness we give that we can receive and we can give, but there's still damage. And so I am still working on that every day with Kathy, even where we are today. I love her, I care about her, and I'm always going to pour into her. With each of my kids, my grandkids, I've created damage for many years in the world around me. And for the rest of my life, I need to not just hang my hat on this grace that God gave me, but work to restore those. And the biggest lesson I got this from was from my father. All this stuff, my father's gone for 10 years. And I get this call. Mighty Oaks began because of the grace that God gave me, the grace that my wife Kathy had given me, and the restoration that I found. But in the middle of starting Mighty Oaks, the first week of starting Mighty Oaks, I'm out because of this grace, given this opportunity that God gave me, and I get a call from a hospital. Hadn't heard from my dad in 10 years. And it said, your father had a stroke and a heart attack, and I'm the only child, and I have to sign some stuff. I was so angry that he even put my name on a list. I was like, why would he? I haven't seen him in 10 years, hadn't heard from him. Why would he put my name, like the audacity of him to put my name on an emergency contact list? I was pissed. Like, I'm like, why would he do that? And I was so angry that he did. And then I had to pause and think of all the things he did to me, where they compared to what I did to my family. But I'm sitting in this position right now of forgiveness and grace in a moment of restoration and getting this opportunity God gave me. How could I deny that of my father? Begrudgingly, not just like it wasn't with a happy heart. I went, I signed those papers, and I was there for him when he got out of the hospital. And then I worked with him and I got to know him more. And then he disappears again. And I'm like thinking he abandoned me. What had happened was in his state, he was drug off by this lady he was with. He was bedridden, so he was parked in a corner for a social security check in a drug house. And I got an anonymous call, and we went there and we found him and was able to get him out of that situation. And when no one else would, he had no one in his life. He didn't own a pair of underwear. He didn't own a toothbrush. He owned nothing. He was parked in the corner of a drug house with a feeding tube that was open, like not even closed, open. He had his fingernails were like so long, he had feces in his fingernails. He was in soiled. And so we got him, went there, we got him out that house, got him into a convalescent facility because that's the only place that I could get him. I couldn't get him anywhere else because he required so much care. And I started to share my story with him, my life that I had part with him, and I shared my relationship with Jesus with him. And in my dad's last year, I got to share my relationship with Jesus with him. I got to offer him the grace and forgiveness that was given to me. And in those final days, he started getting dementia. He would call me up, and he had never told me he loved me before. He'd call me and say, "Chad, this is your daddy. I love you." And he would say it over and over again. "I'm sorry." And then he'd hang up. And I'd say, "Okay, okay, Dad," and he'd hang up. And then he called me like 5 minutes later and do it again because he had forgot he called me. And that was the state he was in. And there's just repentance and grace that he was given, and just happy to connect with his son and tell his son for the first time in all these years that he loved me, that he was sorry. And I
Mm.
believe that we had a terrible life together, but I believe in eternity we'll be able to have redemption for that. And he passed. And I was able to give that to my father because Kathy and my family was able to give that to me. And the only reason they gave that to me is because me taking personal responsibility for my situation and investing and trying to put the pieces back together, the damage I caused. And man, we all make mistakes and we all cause damage in people's lives, mostly to the people we love.
Yeah.
And we have to accept responsibility. We have to do the whole work.
Mm. You've
Long
just
answer.
gutted me on this show, like, because I know some of the information that you're not sharing with our listeners, and I know part of how evil your dad was to your mom and to your brother and to you and to others. And if people knew that part of the story, to know that that same angry, evil, vengeful man found himself in that drug house in Oklahoma, was saved by his son, and that every day he'd call you to say, "I love you." Like it's one of the most transformational, beautiful stories of redemption. You keep using the word during our conversation, restore, restoration. It gives me and you, and I think us, hope that the scars in our life can be redeemed, that the brokenness can somehow be made whole and new again. So, man, I appreciate your faith. I appreciate your life. I appreciate the Mighty Oaks Foundation and the work you're doing there for our veterans and first responders and their family. So, we're going to wrap up this conversation. Yes, you, by the way, because we booked the podcast to talk about a book, here's the one line, and I'll talk about it more in the wrap. Riptide. Okay, it's the 700th book that my incredible guest has written. This kid who did not graduate high school until after enlisting in the Marines is now writing these books. This one's another phenomenal one. It's called Riptide. Check it out. It's available now. But Chad Robichaux, my friend, we have 7 questions. They're short fire questions, in and out, man. Here we go. What's the best, most impactful book you've ever read?
There's several, but it may sound cliche, but I'd say Wild at Heart, man. John Eldridge.
Awesome.
It's popular. A lot of people read it, but Wild at Heart was just so impactful with me. I'd say there's others right now, but at that time in my life when I read it, when you asked the most impactful, at that time when I read it, it was
Uh,
exactly what I needed when I needed it. And John Eldridge is a beautiful way to share the gospel to the vast majority of people, and it really challenged, inspired me.
what's one positive characteristic that you possessed as a little boy in Louisiana, but you wish you exhibited that same characteristic more so today?
Joy, like I've always been such a joyful person, and then after the events I told you, it's something that doesn't come natural anymore. I have to seek for it, and I kind of need it. I need the environment around me to
Mm.
tap into.
If your home caught fire, I see all these beautiful things behind you right now on the screen, but if your home caught fire and all living things are out, you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item. What's that one physical thing you'd come back outside with?
Not that I'm in the awards at all, but I think I grabbed the Bonhoeffer Award. I was recipient of the Bonhoeffer Award. Glenn Beck gave it to me. I was the fourth person to ever receive it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is one of my life heroes.
Yeah.
And I didn't receive that award for me. I received it because on behalf of the most brave and courageous people that I've seen that helped in the most desperate time, the Afghanistan evacuations and pulling 17,000 people out. So I feel like so moved that I got to be the recipient of that and hold it for other people.
Right on.
The people that the war, some of those that we can't even say their names, that was there helping me in those rescue operations. So if I had to grab one thing, it'd probably be that.
Chad, one of the most impressive things I've ever heard of any individual I've ever met was something you and I did not even talk about. I mean, th this idea of going back into that country and fighting for those who fought for you, 17,000 lives saved, man. It's an incredible, epic chapter in your life. So let's move forward though. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who do you want next to you?
With the exemption of Jesus.
You, you could have Jesus, man. If you want Jesus right there, come on.
Of course, Jesus. If I have to get the thing with the exemption of Jesus, it would be Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Cool. What's the best advice Bonhoeffer or anyone else ever gave you?
Life's not about us. It's not about you. It's not about you. We live our whole lives believing that the world revolves around us, that we're the centers of our own universe. And that's not what it's about. Life is about others. And as soon as you shift that perspective and start living for others, you'll find that you'll be the most blessed. So,
What would you tell your 20-year-old self if you could go back in time and grab him by the ear and whisper some wisdom his way? What does the 20-year-old version of you need to hear?
you can do it. You can do it.
Final question for one of my heroes, Chad Robichaux. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How do you want yours to read?
I think it's the founder of the Salvation Army. The one word on his tombstone, others. Others. That's when I found joy, when I shifted my life to being about others.
My friends, you're listening to a single page essentially from one chapter of a mighty book that has been written out by my friend Chad Robichaux. You can check out another book that he's written called Riptide. He's written, what, 12, 11 books now?
Yeah.
But man, I'm in awe of the agony that you grew up in, the misery that you were part of, the heroes who showed up for you, the white flag of surrender that led you forward, and the life you're leading today because of it. It's an amazing, epic, worthy, not perfect, but worthy life story that I'm grateful to know more about.
Man, I appreciate you, especially coming from you. That means a lot. I'm grateful for meeting you and a connection and being on the show.
My friends, that's the testimony of Chad Robichaux. My name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift it is. Live with your souls on fire.